Ahoy! Joe Buddy Hambone here, and I'm back again with a brand new coupon code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. This month, it's going to be Love RPGs, and it's going to be running now all the way through Valentine's Day. So you can get $5 off any order of $25 or more, either online or in person over at Noble Knight Games. Now, there has never been a better time than right now, especially if we're still hanging out at home to pick up some more games to play with our friends and family. So swing on by to nobleknight.com and pump in the code LOVERPGs and get $5 off any order over $25 or more. And don't forget, Noble Knight has a killer trade-in program, so if you've got some older games that you're just not feeling anymore, or if you just need to make some space for some brand new ones, Noble Knight's got you covered. So if you're shopping over at Noble Knight Games between now and Valentine's Day, make sure you use the code LOVERPGs. That's LOVERPGS to get $5 off any order of $25 or more from our friends over at Noble Knight Games.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He told me the last time he was surrounded by so many mutants, it was on mass transit, Stu Horvath.
That's a long time ago. I haven't been on mass transit in, it feels like decades now.
Lucky you. How's it going today, Stu?
Pretty good. How are you?
You know I can't complain. What are we going to chat about today?
So we're going to chat about the 1976 role-playing game Metamorphosis Alpha. But before we get to that, I just want to tell our listeners two quick stories, and you, because I don't think you know these things.
Oh, cool. Do tell.
First thing, I've been running Horror on the Orient Express, right, for my online Unwinnable friends. And we got to about the halfway point, and we're in one of the flashbacks, and I nailed a plot reveal that, like, literally blew up people's heads at the end of the session. And I'm just like so stoked on that I just needed to share.
Well, congratulations on that. But when you say blew up their heads, you mean blew their minds. Their characters' heads are still intact and they're playable.
Yeah, unlike a point earlier in the campaign when someone's head actually blew up. And somebody was at risk of their head blowing up in this session too, but they made it through. Yeah, no, it was a revelation that really hit home, and I'm very proud of myself.
Well, good luck to all of those unwinnable players. May the dice always roll in your favor, especially when Stu's the keeper of secrets.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up that was super cool was that over the holiday break, one of the folks in the Vintage RPG Discord, his father-in-law's house was getting cleaned out. His son is cleaning his father-in-law's house and finds a whole bunch of old Dungeons & Dragons stuff, including the 5th printing of Palace of the Vampire Queen, which we covered on the podcast a couple weeks ago. It's absolutely insane to me that this was just sitting in some guy's attic.
Intact all of these years. Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, I was like, dude, get that thing in plastic. And Brian Taylor was like, if Stu says to get it in plastic, get it in plastic, because he hates plastic.
You are not a fan of plastic, but you are a man who knows and understands and healthily respects preservation. So, wow, good on you, Discord member.
He hadn't even heard the episode yet. He was just like, I found this thing and I think it's valuable. And then a week later, he's just like, oh my God, you already covered this on the podcast.
Well, then I bet he definitely went out and got some plastic to wrap that in.
Oh, yeah.
That is so cool. Well, that is awesome. I always love to hear when games go the right way and everyone's having a good time. And I especially love to hear about people finding treasure when they're doing the hard work of cleaning someone's house out. So good on you, everybody. Stu, why don't we talk about Metamorphosis Alpha?
Okay. Metamorphosis Alpha is by James M. Ward, who is a member of Gary Gygax's original D&D group. He was one of the first folks who started working at TSR, developing stuff. Metamorphosis Alpha is not the first science fiction role-playing game, but it is the first one that anybody remembers.
This is true.
The first one is actually a kind of bawdy game called Starfaring by Ken St. Andre, who designed Tunnels and Trolls. And, that exists, it's out there, but, nobody's heard of it. So he gets the prize, but Metamorphosis Alpha sort of gets the notoriety of being the first science fiction role-playing game. Really, it's one of the first 10 or so role-playing games ever. This is a very small, narrow window of time when, everybody's kind of making their stuff and getting the prizes for being the first at something. Not really what you would consider traditional science fiction, though.
Really?
No. It is very much a science fantasy sort of game. The idea behind it is that you're on a generation ship, a colony ship. A contemporary example would be the Covenant in Aliens Covenant, in which it's a gigantic ship filled with people. And the idea with a generation ship is that everybody's alive and awake. You're going through generations of crew members on the trip. You're not in cryosleep. So it's this massive ship called the Warden, and it's going through space, and it unexpectedly hits this radiation storm, right? So there's flora and fauna. So there's like levels that are just like, oh, this is the grassland level, and oh, this is the mountain level, and like they have all sorts of animals and stuff on the ship too. And this radiation cloud passes through the ship, and everything goes haywire, and mutants happen. So there's all these crazy mutants. Like, so now there's bear men, and there's giant carnivorous plants, and society breaks down, right? And that was like 300 years ago. So you begin the game at a point when you're a human survivor, either mutant or non-mutant, in a small village kind of social unit, and you've been surviving here, and you don't know how to interface with the technology anymore. It's like, when Arthur C. Clarke said, anything of sufficiently advanced technology, it'll appear as magic if you don't have the experience with it.
Yep.
That's the same thing here. They've lost their experience with it. The technology seems like magic. There is no indication that anybody on the ship knows that they are on a ship at this point, which is crazy.
So they're just flying through space, and they don't even know that space is happening outside of this world that they think they're in. They probably think they're on a planet, right?
Yep.
I actually think that's kind of cool.
It is pretty cool.
When you say science fantasy, like the first thing that pops into my head is something like a Flash Gordon, but like the Dino De Laurentiis Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Where Flash Gordon came from Earth, where he was a Jets football player, and now he is the savior of the universe.
I'm surprised you didn't say that with a falsetto.
Oh, you mean savior of the universe?
There we go. I feel better.
Okay, as you are.
Yeah, and the game plays basically like D&D, right? So you leave your village and you're basically going out to find technology, and that requires you just exploring the hexes around your village and maybe going into the dungeons. I was doing air quotes when I said that. I don't know if you could tell from the tone of my voice that there's air quotes.
I feel like it was greatly implied.
Okay, good. Listeners, write and let me know if you could hear what I'm saying, air quotes. So the dungeons are actually just like the maintenance ducts and like the engineering crawl spaces of the ship. So you have these 14 or 24 levels that are massive. They're like 50 miles by 100 miles, right? And one level has like factories in it. One level's just all ocean with some islands. Like, so there's all these different biomes, but all of this stuff connecting those decks and keep them functioning. So like all the life support stuff is in there, the power, all of this stuff is contained in these engineering sections, which are de facto dungeons where you'll find less mutants, more like automated security stuff like robots and turrets and things like that. And like, because you're supposed to be coming from a place of technological ignorance, and because it's a theater of the mind kind of game, like you could be fighting robots and not really kind of realize that they're robots, or you could be getting technology and it's like a hairdryer, not a heat gun. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's so cool.
The system itself is a heavily modified version of the original wood grain white box Dungeons & Dragons that doesn't have character progression, which I think is super interesting. Usually I think that Chaosium gets the credit for like doing like the first character class list, no progression, but it's probably Metamorphosis Alpha. So there's no levels and you don't get more hit points. Like anything that you would consider character progression is translated from the technology that you find. So like you're going to be upgrading your armor, you're going to get like better guns, you might get like a piece of technology that lets you like zap people with your brain, stuff like that. Your technology is your advancement, which is an interesting system that I don't think has really been used too much. I've been thinking a lot about the idea of character class in Dungeons & Dragons, and like they worked so hard to make sort of D&D realistic to their idea of realism, right?
Right.
Like you have weapon speed and that sort of stuff. All the minutia of combat is really well thought out and how much you can get done in a second. But then you have this idea of character class and experience points and leveling. And like you do certain things that get you experience points. And when you get enough experience points, you level. And when you level, you get more hit points. And generally, like, maybe you unlock a new ability. that is like such a strange abstraction. Like nothing in real life is like that. You know what I mean?
Right. And I know there's so many people probably listening right now going, but Stu, it's a game. And they're shouting into the ether. But we hear you. We're feeling it. You know, in the past, when we recorded this, your cries of anger from the future, we're feeling them now. Time is a flat circle, if we've learned anything from last year.
Yeah.
I like it, though. I mean, I like the idea of you are gaining more abilities by getting stuff that gives you the abilities, not just some, oh, well, you got X amount of points and now you cash them in and you're a badass.
Exactly, yeah.
Now you suddenly get, like, stronger, where, again, yes, I know it's a game, whatever, but there is a certain degree of, you know, I look back when I was playing first edition and second edition, and I appreciated the way that the characters leveled up, because you do level up to a certain degree really fast in some ways. And I do liken that to, you know, you get out there, you're learning the job, you're getting better at it right away. But then there's a certain point where it all kind of stops and you have a ways to go before you can achieve any kind of mastery of the class that you are. You know, where it goes, oh, we leveled up because we got 300 hit points, and then we got 900 hit points, now we got 1200 hit points, but now that next level is not coming for like 20,000 hit points. Like, you gotta earn it the hard way, which also, you know, where you gain more hit points up front to make your character kind of, I think, realize their potential, and then if you want to gain any more, you're going to have to earn it. You know, I appreciated that about the earlier editions, and to me, I appreciate something like this where it's like, you are still the same meat sack that you were when you crawled into, and I'm doing air quotes now, everybody, dungeon. However, now you can actually protect yourself better because you got a better hard candy shell. You got like this like crown that lets you shoot mine bullets or something like that. And that said, in the end of the day, you can still die.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, I prefer the odds are I might not make it out of this one to like the total power fantasy, which is what D&D has evolved into over these last bunch of decades. So this actually sounds pretty appealing to me, Stu.
Yeah, and it's not that I think that the D&D class leveling system is bad. I've dealt with it for so long that I don't think of it critically. So every once in a while, like, something about it jumps out at me, and I'm just like, damn, that's strange. Like, the only way I get more hit points, arguably, is by going to the gym. Like, that's the only way that, like, I increase my physical whatever. So, like, this idea of just, like, I'm walking around and, like, a light comes out of me, and then all of a sudden, like, I have bigger biceps and you can hit me one more time before I fall down is just really, like, strange when you contrast it with the idea that, like, they were going for sort of a meticulously realistic combat experience. It's not actually realistic, but, like, something that simulates something that feels like it's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a fight before. I'd prefer to actually just do it on the paper with a pencil instead of actually getting hit by something, you know?
Totally. And I think that it's really interesting that Ward comes up with this system that's more direct. Like, it makes sense. You know, my character is better now because he has a helmet. It's just weird to me that that didn't kind of catch on as, like, a modification of D&D. Like, this is sort of like Lost in Time. You don't ever really see this kind of approach in any other TSR game. Well, except for one, but we'll get to that in a second.
Do you think that one of the things that could have lent it to that, essentially being buried, was the rapid-fire success of Dungeons & Dragons?
Yeah, kind of. I don't think it was intentionally buried. I think that the more research I do for this book, the more I read about how TSR kind of did business, and the more I compare their games to other people's games, and the larger role-playing game community was really evolving the approach towards role-playing games, I really just think that TSR had the advantage of hitting first, and that makes them biggest. And I think that they really relied on the biggest part to keep going. The fact that, like, they had the most money, they had the most professionalized staff, at least at this point, which isn't saying much, but it's like a matter of degrees. So I think that, like, when you look at something like Metamorphosis Alpha or Empire of the Petal Throne or any of these other products that kind of go nowhere, I think they go nowhere because no one knew what to do. I don't think that TSR was ever really a well-run business, but at this particular moment in time, from like 74 to 78, it is just luck and brass that gets them through it, you know? We've talked about this before. Like, they really thought that they shouldn't write adventure modules, which is, like, ludicrous.
Bonkers, man.
Everybody else in the industry knew that, like, you needed to make more stuff to sell more stuff. Basic kind of math. And TSR just really resisted that. And that's kind of what gets Metamorphosis Alpha. Metamorphosis Alpha is just, you have everything that you need. You don't need, specific adventures to kind of play. It would have been nice. I would have liked that. But as the game is designed, it's a finished game. One book, that's it. It's done. And because of the design philosophy and the business model of TSR at the time, it just never got any supplements. And because of that, it kind of died. Because that's what happens when you don't support a game.
Yeah, you can't just go one and done when you make a game. You got to just keep pounding out the extra supplements and the adventures and the things and the swag to get people to stay interested in it. Like, a band that has any kind of longevity or success is going to make more than one record. Same thing with games.
And Dungeons & Dragons, they actually thought after the Gods, Demigods, and Heroes supplement, which I think is supplement 4, supplement 5, the forward to that is just like, this is the last D&D book. And it's just like, you're insane if you think that you're going to put out 4 books and that's it.
Yeah.
Almost like the arrogance of it to be like, oh no, Dungeons & Dragons is done. Like, what?
Until we see the extra 0 added to that check, and then we're coming right back.
Spells and Swords, the miniature rules for OD&D, comes out 3 months after that book. Tim Kask doesn't even mention it. Like, the fact that he was just like, this is not the last D&D book. Huh, go figure. Like, just...
No one told me. Here's another book.
So, a lot of people love this game. It recently got the Goodman Games redo.
Oh, that's awesome. They do great work with those.
Reprinted everything for a special edition Kickstarter jam. And there has been new material made for it. James M. Ward, I believe, contributed a module that actually pushes the story forward. So, like, it's got a great cover. I love a spaceman who's a skeleton in the suit. So it's like the captain's in his chair in his full spacesuit, and it's a skeleton. And it says captain on his visor. And it's just like, yes, I love that. So that's cool. There's love for this game. And I think that it continues to kind of capture people's imagination because it is well known to be the sort of foundation that James Ward built Gamma World on.
Whoa.
And we're going to talk about Gamma World next week. Before, when I said that there was one other game that kind of had this idea of progression through technology that you get in the world, it's Gamma World, which makes sense because it's also James Ward.
Well, very cool, Stu. Do you have any final thoughts on Metamorphosis Alpha, or do you want to save it for the next episode when we talk about Gamma World?
Let's save it for the next episode. Let's just go right to it. I mean, you guys have to wait, but we're going to go right to it.
This is happening in real time for us, everybody. And that being said, this is another awesome episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG, posting stuff about things like Metamorphosis Alpha every day of the week.
Very cool. You can find me on the Twitter at Handbreaker. I tweet about board games. I tweet about cute animals. I tweet about Dungeons and Dragons. You could follow my day-to-day adventures in podcasting and in life over on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. If you really like the show, and we really like that you really like the show, you can check us out over on Patreon. Patreon.com/VintageRPG. We've got early release episodes. We've got behind-the-scenes looks at Stu's book and my game that'll be coming out to Kickstarter sooner than you all think. We've also got a great Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of, and some other cool stuff as well. Patreon.com/VintageRPG. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.